Welcome back to the Acceptance Project podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan. You know, one of the strangest things about human beings is how quickly we can become experts on someone else's life without ever living it. Somebody quits their job and people start talking. Somebody stays in a relationship and we wonder why. Maybe they buy that sports car, get a tattoo, dye their hair blue, move across the country. Or they decide they are finally going to wear the outfit they always wanted to wear, and suddenly, everybody becomes a member of the unofficial Life Decision Review Committee. And let's be honest, sometimes people criticize decisions from the comfort of never having to stand in the shoes of the person who had to make them. But maybe compassion begins the moment we stop assuming everybody's trying to build the exact same life we are. Maybe people are not making the wrong choice. Maybe they're making the choice that allows them to breathe again, heal, survive, or finally become themselves. And maybe one of the kindest things we can do is stop measuring someone else's journey against our own map. Today, I want us to talk about that. I want us to talk about compassion, judgment, and learning how to let other people own their choices while we learn to own ours. So get comfortable and watch your toes. I'll try not to step on them. Here's what I've been thinking about lately. Maybe we judge because we assume everybody is trying to build the exact same life we are. Maybe we assume everybody wants the same goals, the same dreams, the same version of happiness, or the same definition of success. But we both know that isn't true. Some people want adventure and excitement that comes from climbing mountains or skydiving. Some people just want a little cabin somewhere where the loudest thing they hear all day is nothing but peace and quiet. And there are people who want a big family around the dinner table. And honestly, thank goodness we are different, because what a painfully boring world this would be if every single person walked the exact same path. Today I want us to talk about compassion, real compassion, the kind that allows people to own their choices without us constantly measuring those choices with our own ruler. Because the truth is, we usually have no idea what pressure someone felt when they made a decision. We don't know what options they had. We don't know what fears they carried into that moment. And maybe they made the best decision they could at the time they needed to make it. And maybe they are actually happy. I think one of the hardest things for people to accept is that someone else's happiness may not look anything like their own. There are people who genuinely feel fulfilled living in a tiny town where everyone knows everyone. And there are people who feel alive in larger cities with the hustle and bustle of cars and the chatter of people everywhere. I love the mountains I grew up in, but I also love large cities. I love the excitement of everything on the run. And the most amazing part about that is that neither person is wrong. They're just different. But somewhere along the way, society started treating differences as if they automatically mean broken, irresponsible, confused, or misguided. And the older I get, the more I realize how exhausting that must feel for people. Imagine finally making a decision that brings you peace, only to have someone else immediately explain why they would never make that choice. I've had this happen to me, and while I just smiled, what I really wanted to say was, and that's why I didn't consult you before I made the decision that was right for me. Imagine buying the car you wanted and someone calls it impractical, or changing careers and people call it risky. Imagine finally wearing something that makes you feel confident and someone smirks like confidence is only acceptable if it fits their style of preferences. But let me ask you something. Have you ever made a choice that probably looked ridiculous to the outside world, but secretly made you incredibly happy? Maybe it was a haircut, moving somewhere new, or going back to school. It's okay to leave something behind that everybody else expects you to stay committed to forever. And maybe the reason that choice mattered so much is that it was never meant to impress anybody else in the first place. It was for you. Now that's where compassion becomes more important, because compassion allows people the freedom to live authentically without requiring public approval from strangers standing safely on the sidelines of someone else's life. So today I want to talk about 3 ways we can show compassion to others. The first way is stop assuming your way is the right way. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming their values should automatically become everybody else's blueprint for happiness. But life doesn't work that way. Some people feel successful making six figures, and some people feel successful sitting on the porch with the people they love. Some people chase promotions while others are chasing peace like it's a bus they don't want to miss. I'm one of those people who wants packed schedules, constant movement, noise, excitement, and a party. Yeah, I'm an extrovert. And there are those introverts who want slow mornings, quiet evenings, fishing poles, campfires, and enough free time to actually remember what day of the week it is. Different priorities doesn't make somebody wrong. And let me stop for a moment to say that being an introvert or an extrovert isn't an insult. I knew someone many years ago who was very much an introvert. And when I mentioned that, they became offended as if I was insulting them. I think social media has made compassion harder because it has trained people to compare, criticize, and comment on lives they only see in carefully edited snapshots instead of full human stories. One person tells you to work harder, another tells you to slow down. One person says travel the world, and another one says settle down and let some grass grow under your feet. At this point, the internet feels like one giant group project where everybody thinks they should be in charge of how the rest of us live our lives. No wonder people feel overwhelmed. Compassion begins when we stop assuming everybody is trying to build the same version of a meaningful life. Now, to help illustrate this idea, I want to share with you a story I read a few months ago. And I tucked it away in a folder somewhere for safekeeping because I didn't know at the time that it would be perfect for our conversation today. But I knew somewhere down the road it would be needed. And so the story goes. A woman once visited a small town famous for its gardens. Every house seemed to explode with color. Roses climbed fences, sunflowers stretched toward the sky, and even the smallest homes had flower beds that looked like paintings. As she walked through the town, she noticed one yard that looked completely different from all the others. There were no perfect rows or carefully trimmed hedges. Instead, wild plants twisted around one another, vines spilled across the fence, and flowers bloomed wherever they pleased. She quietly shook her head and thought to herself, what a mess. An older man sitting on the porch noticed her expression and smiled. Not a fan of the garden? He asked. The woman laughed awkwardly and admitted, I just don't understand it. Every other yard here is organized and beautiful. This one looks chaotic. The man slowly stood up and invited her to walk with him through the yard. As they moved between the plants, he pointed to a cluster of flowers near the fence. These attract butterflies that help pollinate the neighborhood gardens, he explained. A few steps later, he gestured toward another section overflowing with uneven greenery. Those plants were used to make medicine my wife relied on when she was sick. Then he bent down beside a patch of weeds and smiled softly. And these? Well, my granddaughter planted them because she thought they looked happy. The woman stood there quietly, taking it all in. What she had judged as disorder was actually purpose. What she assumed was ugly carried history, healing, and even love. Suddenly, the yard no longer looked messy. It looked human. So the moral of the story is sometimes we judge people because their lives don't look the way we think they should. But compassion begins when we stop assuming our way is the only way beauty, healing, or happiness can grow. Now, the second way to show compassion is to remember. We rarely know the pressure behind a decision someone has to make. Now, this is the part I wish more people understood. Most people are making decisions while carrying struggles no one else can see. Have you ever been driving somewhere and it seems everyone in the car knows the fastest route and is blurting out, turn here, no, don't do that, turn right instead, make a U-turn, you missed your exit, you're going to get a ticket. It's stressful, and what you want to do is scream, shut up, I'm trying to listen to the GPS. Meanwhile, you're trying to avoid hitting the car in front of you, not miss your turn, and great, you just spotted the cop in the rearview mirror. The problem is, we only see the outcomes of people's decisions. We rarely see context. We don't see the sleepless nights filled with anxiety and fear, and the financial pressure that this decision required. We didn't hear the pressure from family members as each one made an effort to interject their opinion, or the emotional exhaustion that comes with sitting in silence as grief and loneliness force you toward a choice. Sometimes people are not choosing between a good option and a bad option. Sometimes people are choosing between impossible and impossible. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, many of us would make very different decisions if we carried the exact same weight someone else was carrying. That is why compassion matters. Compassion doesn't mean agreeing with every decision people make. It doesn't mean removing accountability. It simply means recognizing humanity before judgment. Because people are complicated, life is complicated, and most people are trying to survive situations they never expected to face in the first place. Now, concept number three may be the most difficult for some people. Let's celebrate people instead of secretly competing with them. One of the quietest forms of judgment is when people cannot simply let someone else enjoy something. Have you ever noticed that? Somebody gets excited about something harmless and somebody else immediately tries to shrink it. There's always that negative thinker in every crowd. The car is a waste of money. Someone actually said that to me after I purchased a convertible Mustang several years ago. My thoughts were, well, it's a good thing I didn't buy it for you now, isn't it? Or someone says, why would you wear that? A friend of mine shared with me once that no matter what she wore, a colleague felt as though they had permission to comment that someone their size or age shouldn't wear something like that. I especially enjoy it when someone says, I would never do that. Again, that inner voice says, well, then ask them what choice they would have made had they been given the options you were given. And of course, the award winning lack of compassion comment goes to, that's weird. Two little words that tell me everything I need to know about you and your feelings. If someone didn't contact you prior to making a decision, you shouldn't be saying to them that their choice is weird. Maybe it's weird for you, but maybe it's just perfect for them. Sometimes I think people forget joy does not have to make sense to everyone else in order to matter. And honestly, life becomes a lot lighter when we stop trying to manage everybody else's happiness like unpaid consultants. Maybe someone loves bright clothes, comic books, piercings, tattoos, or maybe they want chickens in their backyard. Maybe they have no rhythm whatsoever but decided they love to dance. Remember our friend Maury Schwartz from A Tuesday Kind of Wisdom? He loved to dance and he encouraged everyone to do it, no matter how silly that they looked doing it. And you know what I say to those people who make those bold choices? Good for you. You do you. Not every choice needs a panel discussion. Some choices are simply people trying to feel alive again. And maybe instead of standing behind closed doors judging somebody's walk through life, we learn to celebrate that they had the courage to walk it at all. This reminds me of a story about an older woman who danced to the beat of her own drum. Every Friday night during the summer, the town held concerts in the park. Families brought lawn chairs, kids chased each other through the grass, and every single Friday, without fail, there was an older woman who danced alone near the front of the stage. She didn't care what kind of music was playing. It could be country, rock, jazz, or old Motown. It made no difference to her. She danced to all of it. People noticed her, of course. Some whispered that she was strange. Others laughed quietly and wondered why she always danced by herself. A few people seemed uncomfortable simply because she looked so completely unafraid to be herself in public. And honestly, well, that level of confidence makes some people nervous. But the woman never appeared bothered. Maybe she did hear the comments and simply chose peace over approval, which, if we're being honest, is a level of emotional freedom many adults never quite reach. One evening, a little girl standing near the stage finally walked up and asked her, why do you dance when nobody else does? The woman smiled and replied, because the music played, whether people joined in or not. And that answer lingered in the air long after the song ended. Because somewhere along the way, many people stopped dancing, not literally, but emotionally. They stopped wearing bright colors they love, trying new things, and laughing too loudly. They stopped taking chances and being fully themselves because someone once rolled their eyes, made a comment, or called them weird. So they spend years carefully editing themselves just to avoid judgment while quietly losing pieces of their joy in the process. But not her. She danced like someone who understood the assignment. Life was temporary and embarrassment was a terrible reason to miss it. And slowly, something amazing started happening. By the end of summer, children began dancing beside her. Then parents joined in, then couples. Even people who swore they would never dance in public somehow found themselves clapping along barefoot in the grass with smiles on their faces and no longer caring what they looked like. Turns out, courage can be contagious. Sometimes the people dancing to the rhythm of their own drum are not lost at all. Sometimes they are simply brave enough to hear music the rest of the world is too distracted to notice. So, as we come to the end of our time together this week, I want to share one more thing with you. The older I get, the more I realize compassion is not about agreeing with every choice people make. It's about understanding that every single person you meet is carrying experiences, fears, dreams, disappointments, insecurities, and hopes that you may never fully understand. Some people are trying to heal, trying to survive, or maybe trying to rediscover who they are after years of shrinking themselves to make other people comfortable. So maybe one of the kindest things we can do is stop assuming everybody should want the exact same life we do. Because not everybody is trying to climb the same mountain. Some people are just trying to finally breathe again. So when you see someone bold enough to make choices or chase dreams, either stand beside them and applaud so loudly they can't hear the negative opinions or others, or at least, for God's sake, have the decency to get out of their way because you're blocking traffic. Have you ever made a decision that other people judged, but deep down you knew it was right for you? Or maybe there was a moment someone showed you compassion instead of criticism just when you needed it most. If so, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Bryan@bridgingsuccess.com to share your thoughts and stories because those conversations matter more than people realize. And also, don't forget to share this podcast with someone who may be in the middle of a storm trying to make the best decision they can with the few options they have. Don't show up with the microphone to announce their bad decision. Show up with an umbrella and say, "Let me hold this while you decide your next move." And just remember, some people are learning to let go while others are learning to begin again. Sometimes the most important thing we can remember is that people are far more than a collection of choices we observe from the outside. They are human beings with struggles, strengths, dreams, and stories we may never fully see or even understand. So, until next time, take care of yourself and take care of those around you. The Acceptance Project podcast is a production of Bridging Success, LLC. To learn more about the podcast and our work, please visit bridgingsuccess.com. This podcast and its contents are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. I'm Dr. Bryan Gross, but I'm not a licensed therapist. The topics and opinions shared by me and any guests are our own and should not replace professional or medical advice. If you're seeking mental health support, medical guidance, or help with personal matters, please reach out to a licensed professional who can provide the individual support you need.